Welcome back to Engaging Minds with your host, Dr. Howard Gluss, licensed clinical psychologist.
I'm Dr. G, and we're back on the show. The number is 1-800-222-5222. And I know a lot of people are thinking, like, why, again, I'm going to reiterate why we chose the End of Life Act on complex grieving on Mother's Day. I'm going to also say it this way, that if your mother is alive, that you really should find a way to connect and understand that this time is really precious. If, unfortunately, they're dealing with issues like the End of Life Act, or you're dealing with, grieving process, as Dr. Nelson keeps saying, that it's very compassionate, because what we're doing is we're giving people power and control in their last moment to have a choice that maybe they don't want to be kept alive indefinitely or in pain indefinitely. And that's very much about loving life. If you ask me, it's complex, but it's very much about loving and appreciating life, not about wanting to leave it. Because most people who decide to utilize the End of Life Act, it's not about being, like some people think, suicidal or they're depressed at the time. So just wondering what you thought about that, Mary, as a fellow psychologist and psychoanalyst.
What you triggered in my mind was this image of all these people I have seen, especially women, who grieve on days like Mother's Day because they did not have children or could not have children. There's that kind of grieving on Mother's Day as well. And it's very, very painful for people.
You know, I was thinking about it today, too. My mother passed away a long time ago, and I thought about it that actually I'm the exact same age that she was when she passed away.
Geez. An age-matching anniversary. I love those because age-matching anniversaries are so significant to us. When we reach the age of a parent, when they died, it's significant. There's so many mixed emotions, aren't there? Like, I have felt the same way. There's guilt and there's surprise or startle, like you're still alive and your parent died at this age. There's all kinds of emotions that come up during that time. What's so interesting is that grief is an emotion that sends an alert to us to help us to remember rather than forget. And when people feel grief, they try to forget, but in fact, the emotion is telling us to remember.
You know, I was thinking when my mom passed away, one of my first thoughts when I was thinking about being the same age was when she passed away, I thought she was kind of old. And now here I am.
Right.
I mean, it was kind of a selfish thought, but here I am going like, I'm kind of the same age right now. My
mother died at 42. Wow. And when I reached that age, I was astonished that I was still alive.
I wonder if I'll feel guilty if I outlive her.
Birthdays.
You just start counting birthdays.
Stop counting them.
You know, you keep them with you, and you say how wonderful it is that you're alive, and you wish they could be as well.
Yeah, and you know what? In some ways, I agree with you. I do feel like I keep her memory alive inside of me, and I still have some of those conversations. I wanted to ask Dr. Nelson, what about what happens if somebody changes their mind? Does that ever happen in this kind of situation? Have you had experience with it?
Definitely. We've changed our minds, like we change underwear sometimes, and patients in hospice are not really any different, especially at that stage, because they're making a very critical decision to do something that ends suffering, and they do change their minds. We've had a patient recently who did change her mind, or at least wanted to postpone it for the time being, and that's absolutely fine. There is once that first visit by the physician is made as part of the End of Life Act, it starts the clock, but the clock can keep going. The patient doesn't have to ever finish the other two consultations, or even if they do finish the other two to make 3 total, they still don't have to act on it. It's really judgmental.
I have a question for Dr. Nelson.
Sure.
What about all of those people who make a choice to not receive treatment when treatment will prolong their life? Is that a similar thing? And what are the ethics and choices we have around that?
I think it depends on what kind of benefit the treatment's giving. Are the treatment benefits congruent with the patient getting better or relieving suffering or something of that sort? Or is it or is it palliating something and prolonging suffering? So I think the first question is what's the point of the treatment? Is there palliation to it? Because that's I think really at the crux of hospice and end of life.
I think again, I'm dealing with a lot of patients in this situation, and one woman told me, she's had some treatment, for cancer, and she has said to me repeatedly that she feels that if the treatment doesn't work, and they said they may want to do it again, but she said that the treatment was so painful and so difficult, she's made up her mind and decided that she would not do it again, and would rather have a shorter amount of time and have some sort of quality.
Some of the side effects from the medications are unbearable. I mean, people wake up daily with nausea or nausea, vomiting, and just things that just make life miserable. And so sometimes the treatments are worse than are actually not doing something about it.
What about when someone has a conservator, or does that come into play, like with the decision for the End of Life Act?
Again, patient has to be sound. Patient has to have terminal diagnosis, has to be sound. Yes. The dementia patients are and it's a growing population in the country. Unfortunately, we're seeing more different types of dementia patients who, unfortunately, can never make this decision for themselves.
I did want to mention right now that Dr. Nelson is involved with Mid-Valley Hospice, and Mid-Valley Hospice is in Sherman Oaks, and they are definitely supporters of the End of Life Option Act. And if you want to find out more information about it, you can contact Anna at Mid-Valley Hospice. Her number is 818-386-2600. That's 818-386-2600. And what I love about Anna is she's very compassionate and very sensitive to people and their needs. And if this is something that you want to get more information about, please feel free to do so. Again, the number is 818-386-2600. And you can always contact me at drhowardgluss at live.com, and I will forward the information to Anna. I wanted to give you both a moment because you're both really great at what you do. If people, Dr. Nelson, wanted to find out more about your work, how could they do so?
Sure. My office is in Torrance. It's the Aesthetic Center and Medical Wellness. We are located just on the border of Torrance and Palos Verdes. Our number there is area code 424-237-2622, and you can reach us at the aestheticcentertorrance.com.
And Dr. Lamia, if people wanted to find out more about your work, how could they do so?
They can go to my website, marylamia.com, MaryLamia.com, for a look at my books and my work in general.
And we know that you have a book coming out soon, don't you?
Well,
you're working on it.
Had the fifth one coming out, but there's one that hopefully will come out on grief in the next year or two.
We'll definitely have to have you back on because I know whatever you're going to say, it's going to be pretty insightful. What about, Cary, the religious opposition to it? Because I know there's definitely some of that going on. And how do you... What's your answer to that when people feel like we're playing God and we shouldn't be doing that?
Again, we put this choice in the patient's hand. Or the choice or the option, the thought has to come out of the patient's mouth. So if a patient says, I'm tired of suffering. I've been dealing with this cancer for the last 5 years, and I've done the chemotherapy, I've done the radiation, I've had surgery, and none of it's benefited me. And I'm taking all these different medications, and I feel like hell all day long. I have no energy. They're asking, hey, I want to do something about this. I don't want to go on like this anymore. It has less to do with... At that point, I think religious beliefs than actually just this person ending some suffering. So yes, there are absolute denominational issues with that, but we try to stay non-denominational in our approach to dealing with end of life.
Well, I agree with you on that. I think that that's definitely a personal choice that someone could make, and this is you're just offering the choice. It's not a requirement. Indeed. So if it's contradictory to your religious beliefs, you can choose not to do it.
Sure.
Mary, when we were talking before, you said that there were some important responses to loss that people often fail to consider. So I'm wondering what you were alluding to there.
Well, the main thing is that people often fail to consider that they don't necessarily get over grief, if they're very close to the person they lost, and also that people keep the lost person with them. Many people sense the presence of of the person they lost, or they talk to that person, or they use the deceased as a moral guide in some way. There's a lot of ways in which we keep people with us we have lost, and I don't ever want people to think that you necessarily have to dismiss loved ones in your life who are gone.
I think grief changes over time. I think there's it just changes in the way that we deal with it. But, I have someone very special in my life that I've lost, and I don't really want to lose that memory. I want to keep it very much alive. I want to thank you both for coming on the show. I hope that we made it clear to our audience out there that if the End of Life Act is something that you're considering for a loved one or for yourself, that there are places like Mid-Valley Hospice and Sherman Oaks that you can get that clarified. You can get all that information at 818-386-2600. That it's a choice and it's options, and that's what we're trying to offer people. And what Dr. Lamia is trying to get across is that there is no specific way of grieving, that grieving is complex, individualized, and personal. We're going to go in a completely different direction, but we're always looking at the psychology behind what we're talking about. So it's the process that we're interested in. And one of the processes I'm really interested in is what's going on in Hollywood. There seems like there's so much change with diversity, the hashtag Me Too movement, how we deal with talent and success. So I want you to bring on a expert in the field. Actually, we have Academy Award-winning independent documentary film producer Mitchell Block on. We're going to explore lots of territory in a very short period of time. So, Mitchell, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you very much.
Great. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, Mitchell, about what you won the Academy Award in?
I produced for HBO in 2000 a film called Big Mama, and in Big Mama, a filmmaker named Tracy Saratine followed the story of a grandmother trying to keep custody of her grandson who was a crack baby. Okay. And over a 5-year period, she filmed the story, and ultimately she lost custody of a young boy. Okay. And that film, powerful, moving film by a first-time director.
I'm kind of lost in it. It sounds very powerful. When you pick, I'm curious, do you pick your films? I mean, how do you, there's so many subjects out there. What drives you? What do you feel passionate about that helps you choose what you choose?
All the works I'm involved with deal with serious social issues, whether it's post-traumatic stress or rape in the Congo or the Holocaust in Greece or stories about survivors of a gulag. Those are 2 pictures I'm just finishing now. They all look at important issues and tell stories of transformation and survival.
It's a lot of what we try to do here on the radio show in a very short period of time, this concept of transformation and survival. So when we emailed each other and talked, I asked you about this question about what's going on in Hollywood around multiculturalism and diversity, and I wonder what your thoughts are around that.
Well, it's exciting. When you have a picture that breaks stereotypes like Black Panther and becomes one of the biggest grossing films of all time, you can say things are starting to change. We're not going to see half of all the films directed by women tomorrow, but that process is slowly changing and taking place as the film programs, like I've been teaching at USC since 1979. And when I first started at SC, there were virtually no women or no people of color in the program. And today, the program is easily 50% women and minorities. And I think that's really terrific. That's where the change is going to come from.
I'm thinking about it from a psychological point of view, that the process of change takes a little bit of time, but just that we're making it conscious, even more conscious now, and everybody's starting to process through it, to me is a very positive thing. And I think it does create some sort of permanent change. It may not happen as quickly as people would like it to happen, but at least we're conscious of it now, and we're starting to deal with it. And that's what I think is exciting.
Well, I think that the Hollywood movie, is based on commercial success. And if people who fund movies believe actors, actresses, writers, directors can make money for them, it's irrelevant who they are, what their color is, where they're from. What people want to see in our business is success, not success necessarily artistically as much as success financially.
But can you have both?
Well, I think you see that year after year. The predominant winners in documentary and nominees have been women for the last decade. I think the studios are aggressively trying to find and produce works about women, dealing with women's issues, working with people of color, working with emerging filmmakers. I think that's a change. That's exciting.
So explain to me, is the world of documentary filmmaking, just the dynamics of it, very different than mainstream filmmaking as far as, how things are done and how the process happens?
Technology has allowed the nonfiction filmmaker to make their films with little or no capital. So one can't easily create an animated feature film like Ice for $100,000 or $50,000. One can't crowdfund traditional action pictures, but one can spend time over 3 or 4 or 5 years making a documentary without regard to how much money they have in the bank. A good example would be Poster Girl. The filmmaker who made that hadn't made a documentary before. She spent 5 years covering that's dealing with post-traumatic stress. When I got involved with the picture, it was all about men, but there were 2 women in the film, and one of the women was spectacular, and I said, let's just pull her out. And so we were able to structure a documentary short that went on and got an Oscar nomination and got HBO to support the funding of it without having to shoot any additional footage. So
go ahead.
It wasn't a money-based production. It was really a film that was done out of love. I'm working with a filmmaker now in Greece, and she's making a film about the Holocaust in Greece. Prior to World War II, there were 85 to 100,000 Jews in Greece. Today, there are less than 5,000, and she's a survivor. And she decided she wanted to make a film about her past and literally just started shooting. She visited Auschwitz, she visited Buchenwald, and she came to me with this material. And I said, gosh, this is phenomenal. This is really exciting. And there was no money.
I love what you said about the idea that she just started shooting. I have a lot of patients in the industry, and sometimes I say to them, just go out and start doing it and let the process begin and let it evolve. You never know where it's going to go. And look, she started to do it, and she connected with you, and probably a lot of other things have happened, and she just started doing it.
Well, a master's degree at a film school is $125,000 at least if it's a private school, and you can easily make 2 or 3 movies for that. So
what are your
cheaper.
feelings? What are your as someone who teaches at USC? What are your feelings about students going through film programs and the value of them, etc.?
Well, Bill Gates and Warren Buffett are 2 of the richest people in the world, and they don't have MBAs. I spent all this money getting an MBA from Columbia, and I found the training spectacular. So I think the same thing applies to film. I mean, you're not going to be educated in film going out and making a movie. You're going to know how to make a movie. But history, criticism, theory, writing structure, and so on, is really good to learn in a formal environment.
We're going to take a break, but I think a lot of it has to do with the tenacity of the person too, and their ability to go out there. That I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's the school's responsibility to help people be successful, or maybe it's the school's responsibility to just teach them. Mitchell, before we go on, if people wanted to find out more about your work or find a way to get in touch with you, how could they do so?
My company is called Direct Cinema, and we have a website, drcinema.com.
Okay.
And I'm on the internet. Just Google me.
Yes, that's how I found you, so I know for sure you're on the internet. And again, if you missed any of that information, you could always contact me at 1-800-222-5222, the number here, and I will forward the information to Mitchell. So, Mitchell, I have a client, and it sounds like I have a lot of clients, but I actually do. And one of the things he's going through is he feels that he's 50 years old, he wants to start a writing career, and he feels like he's too old for Hollywood, that there's so much ageism in Hollywood, another social issue. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that. If you were to counsel this person, what would you say?
Right. It's cheap. You don't have to, you can keep your day job, write 4 or 5 pages a day, and people buy what's on the page. They don't buy the writer.
Well, that's what I was thinking too, isn't it about the story?
It's all about story, but talent is really what we're talking about, and that's what's rare. I mean, how many really talented people are there in the business? How many John Lasseters or Ken Burns are there? Are Steven Spielbergs? And so with writing, it's not capital intensive, and the more you write, the better you get. And just my recommendation would be to adapt. Don't do original stories. Find a true story, old New Yorkers, old Vogues, old New York Times, and adapt that story into your first feature, because then you have the credibility of it being real, and reality is much more interesting to me than fiction.
Well, sometimes it's hard to tell what's what.
Right, but it's easier to sell. It's much easier to sell. Adapt a book.
What about for a documentarian that's starting? Would you say the same thing?
Tell a story that involves transformation. Pick a person or people who are changing and be prepared to shoot for several years, and you'll get an interesting, powerful story. I mean, my best films are about characters who change over time. I put 20-some people on an aircraft carrier for 6 months, and we did a 10-hour series. And no one's ever done that before, and no one will do it again. But just spend time with your subjects and get to know them and allow them to live their life and be there to document it when things happen.
So it's about the transformation. That's what you're saying. The process. It's not always the content, but it's also the process. You want to be able to take people through, especially that psychological process of change.
That's right. Because whether in Poster Girl, the young woman was dealing with post-traumatic stress, she was dealing with alcoholism and drug addiction, and she had to get her act together. And so over a multi-year period, we watch that young woman change and become healthy. And I think it's that kind of story that's powerful and compelling for audiences. And because you're shooting it over time, you're not spending all your money at once. And you're able to edit and shoot and raise money in that process, because you can do what's called create a sizzle reel. And the sizzle reel will help you sell your project during the process of making it.
So one of the things I want our audience to hear is the idea that this takes time, and you keep mentioning over several years, just like therapy takes time. A lot of times people come to me and they say, how long is it going to take me to change? And I said, I don't know, it depends. I just don't know, but probably several years. But when you watch a lot of feature films, the change happens over, a half an hour, 45-minute period. And that's not always the way life is. So I just want to share that with our audience. That's what you keep mentioning. You watch people over several years.
If I can, yes.
If you're lucky enough.
Right.
Because then the story gets more interesting.
Reality is so much more interesting than fiction. And, you're not making a Hollywood movie. So
the pressures are different.
That's right.
What about we were talking before about students and going to film school or not, and what I hear you saying and what I'm understanding, I think, is that you can get a lot of good education, but in the end, it's just going to be up to you to go out and create your career. I feel like I've seen so many people get more afraid of success, the fear of success, than sometimes the fear of failure. I've seen, especially actors or filmmakers, sometimes they get a big success, and that becomes so overwhelming to them that maybe if they had an addiction issue, they start using again. And I'm wondering, you don't have to agree with me, but I'm wondering what you felt about this concept of a fear of success.
Well, I think it's not a fear of success. I think success is really the exception. And that what we have is the big lie. What we have are people pursuing careers the same way a drug addict is trying to get a fix, believing that they'll get a part, become a star, and so on. And it just doesn't happen that way. It's hard work, but it's also talent, and it's also a lot of luck. I call it, for actors particularly, living life as a lottery, because even if you get the part on a TV show, you're only getting a week. You're only getting a week's work. That's not going to make you a star. If you get in a movie, the movie's probably going to be terrible. So that's not going to make you a star. So
the movie may not even get released.
Right. You can't build a career using a lottery model. The advantage of being a writer is that you can write and create, but you won't necessarily sell. Because if you think about it, writers don't know what sells. Producers know what sells. Studios know what sells. But writers are writing sort of without being in touch with the industry, even though they think they are. And actors are living a lie most of the time because they believe they're going to be successful. And there's nothing in their belief system to sort of confirm that. And even if they could confirm it, they have no control because they're not creating their parts. They're not hiring themselves. They are who they are. And so I think if you want to be an actor or a creative person, a writer, director, and so on, you should have an alternate career and approach the movie and TV business as a hobby. And then if you're successful, you have a life. Far too many people go to film school or don't go to film school, but come out here and spend 30 years waiting for a success. And that's crazy.
Well, you know what? I kind of gave that advice. I'm thinking of a young actor, again, someone I'm working with. Now, all these. But I kept saying to him, and he is definitely having some success. He's getting cast. He's a very good-looking person, in his 20s. I said, why don't you get together with some of your other sort of successful people and try to find a writer? There's lots of writers your age, and maybe try to create something on your own in addition to always having your life dependent on somebody else saying yes to you.
Well, it's not a good idea either, particularly because if you look at the history of cinema, how many John Cassavetes were there? How many actor, writer, directors?
Oh, no, I didn't tell him to write. I said find a writer.
Yeah, but it's like getting a genie in a bottle. I mean, Mel Gibson is an extraordinary talent. Look at his work as a director, as an actor. But they're really the exception. It's so hard because you can't generate a success. It's not something you necessarily can create randomly.
Well, I agree with that. It's just like you can't create a star. Like, how do you... Doesn't somebody else make you a star, so to speak? I mean...
No, it's being in a part that is in a movie that is successful or a TV show that's successful that makes the public excited about the person. Look at Michael Moore and Morgan Spurlock. I mean, we have two stars coming out of documentaries, on-camera subjects. And that's it.
Okay.
I mean, and think about it. In the last 20 years, Morgan Spurlock and Michael Moore. And if you look at theatrical features, how many, De Niro's are there? How many Meryl Streeps are there? It's
So what would you say to someone that feels like this is something they have, I'll hear, this is their calling, this is what they need to do. They love the process of being creative.
It's a hobby. What's wrong with a hobby? What's wrong with having a career and approaching being an actor, a writer, director as a hobby? And then after the 20 years it takes to become an overnight success, you can do it as a business.
Okay.
And then you don't have any pressure. And you can have a life, you can have a family, you can have a career. And, you know, no one's going to tell you if you're a doctor and also appearing on television and actually get a starring role in a successful series, stop being a doctor. You know, but you've had the pleasure and joy of helping people as a doctor while you're creating your other career where you have absolutely no control over your being successful, because it's a lottery. It's not a career.
No, I actually think that's really great advice, and I hope everyone heard it. The sense, what I hear you saying is that get a life. Basically, telling people to get a life, and if you want to be really creative, go out and make it a hobby, and more than anything, like the lottery mentality. It's very interesting. You know, we have a minute left. Any final thoughts before we stop? If a young actor came to Hollywood, a writer or a creative person, well, I actually know what you're going to say. Get a life. But do you have something you want to share before we end?
Well, I think that if you have talent, you should keep making movies. You know, there's nothing wrong with picking up a camera and doing films. I mean, Spike Lee did that, and his early work is terrific. Marty Scorsese's early work was terrific. George Lucas's work was terrific. So I think the technology allows you to create work. You can submit it to festivals, and maybe you'll be successful.
Maybe you'll win the lottery.
Right.
Yes. And with that, Mitchell, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. And we'll be back next week. The number, if you want to call in, if you have any questions that you want me to forward to any of our guests tonight, is 1-800-222-5222. I'm Dr. G, and we'll be back next week.